All right. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Pull Up Show. I'm your host, Mr. BJ Matthews, aka B Jizzle. Before we get started, follow us on the YouTube page, the Pull Up Basketball Podcast. Like, share, subscribe, all of our YouTube videos. Hit that like button, y'all coming in here to share, subscribe. Hit that Cash App, $ Slick Rig 1990. That's our Cash App. You can choose to donate to the Pull Up Basketball Podcast. It's your own discretion. If you guys do not have Cash App, perfectly fine. Hit that super sticker and super comment button as well. If you guys want to donate to the Pull Up Basketball Podcast that we bring to you on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis. And yeah, we're gonna get right into it, man. LA Clipper talk. All my LA Clipper people, make sure you guys let me know that y'all in the comment section. Continuously follow us, subscribe, all that good stuff. We got a good show for y'all today. Obviously, the offseason has approached us. The Clippers took defeat against the Denver Nuggets on Saturday night, which ended their season. And we're going to be going into the offseason realm. A lot of interviews coming, and a lot of good information and content. So the season does not stop for us. We're going to have our first interview in the offseason. We're going to have a familiar face who has been, you know, a main guy on the show, family friend of the show as well. We're going to get my man in, LA Clipper beat writer Law Murray. What's good, my brother Law?
Hey, BJ, thanks for having me.
How's life, first of all? How's everything going?
Blessed, man. Every day I wake up, I'm grateful to be able to do what I do and be healthy doing it. So that's where I'm at.
Let me stay right there. So when you say do what you do, there's an interview, there's a video that I saw you come out and talked about the life of a beat writer, and you gave some really good nuggets about what it's like, being on the road and the job that you've always envisioned for. What is it that you feel like the outsiders need to know what it means to be you every single day covering an NBA team, not just the NBA team, but the entirety of the NBA? What is it like being a life for you every single day?
I think the main thing for me is it's just about consistency, right? And so my job is, first of all, the athletic, it's whatever they need,
Right.
they they're the only entity that I am obligated to. I'm not obligated to do what the league wants or what the Clippers want or what certain players want. I'm there to cover them, but I don't work for them. I work for the Athletic.
Hmm.
That's the main thing. I think a lot of people get confused about what writers do, reporters do, especially reporters. Like, if we're reporting, we're reporting. There's some context to what the reporting is, and uh, we're not there to sugarcoat. We can be there to explain why something is happening and how it's developing and what it means. That's not always going to make a team or a player sound good. It's not always going to make the league sound good, quite frankly. And at the same time, I think we all pursue stories that we want to, we want people to be more connected to what they already care about. Like if you're watching basketball, if you're watching any sport, you probably care. You have the choice to engage in and spend so much time and so much passion on this game and this league and these players and the history of it and just the community of it. Everybody comes together. Like BJ, you saw for a whole year, people come to Inglewood, little spot in LA County,
Yeah.
to cheer on a basketball team
Yeah.
and to enjoy basketball in general. So um, I think you have to feel that as a media member as well. Like I'm very agnostic when it comes to teams. Like I tell people all the time, I'm not a fan of any one team or anything
Mm.
like that. But I absolutely feel the energy of the conversation and why people come to whatever space, whether it's physical or digital, to enjoy watching a team or watching a sport.
Mm.
So all of that is something you got to be accountable for if you're going to be, especially in a spot that I'm in, where I get to be in spaces that not everybody gets to be in,
Yeah.
uh, and that's it's I have to be sensitive to that, like actually feel and open my eyes and my ears to what's happening around me, and to communicate those things effectively.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I always touched on it before we came on. Now that the season's over, we're gonna get into some of the stuff that happened during the season, X interview stuff like that. But I want to know for you personally, but from the previous few years with the Clippers, has anything been different this year as far as your kind of the vibe in the arena, vibe around the team, vibe around the coaches? Do you feel something different from what it was in the previous years? And if so, let me know.
I mean, shoot. Well, for one, this is the first time I covered a team playing in a new arena in my entire career. I've been based in LA since 2010. I'm from Philadelphia, from the East Coast. Obviously, the arena in Philadelphia and the arena in downtown Los Angeles were built a quarter century ago. So, like, you know, um, very different. I remember where I was when those arenas got built, but I never got to be in them growing up or anything like that. I think I went to my first Sixers game maybe in eighth grade, and even then, like, I wasn't. We were in a suite, and it was part of my basketball team, and never, you just didn't pay attention like I pay attention to things now. So, it's just different. Like when you see an entire organization mobilized to having their own space, especially a team like the Clippers, it's like they've never had their own building before. So there's an energy shift there, and everyone felt it, from ownership and the business, department, to the basketball operations and the players and the coaches. Everyone, even teams that were visiting as opponents, like they felt it. How different it was to be at Intuit Dome. The team had, maybe not to start the year, they had to become a different kind of team this year. And certainly by midseason, they had guys who wanted to be there. They had guys who were motivated and felt good about what they were going to be able to accomplish, as well as what they were already accomplishing. And that was big, considering how low the expectations were for the Clippers externally. I mean, people who pay attention to how the Clippers operate and pay attention to the players that they had saw that those expectations were probably out of whack. I mean, me personally, I thought the Clippers were a team that was going to be right there in the middle of the Western Conference. I thought they were a playing tournament team, and I was like, hey, if they are in the playing tournament, I think they would survive it. And the Clippers were so good this year that even though the last couple of weeks of games felt like playing tournament games, they swept them. They
Yeah,
they finished the regular
yeah,
season on an 8-game winning streak. They didn't have a winning streak that long in the previous two seasons. Actually, the previous three seasons, I want to say. So I think the Clippers accomplished a ton, and they felt that, and that's what kind of team I was covering. But they also felt the pressure of needing to stay that good to survive in the Western Conference, which I don't think the West was that good this year. I think there was a ton of, like, the Western Conference was incredibly flawed. Um, it's masked by the fact that you had so many good teams. You had good teams, but these teams are all flawed. I think evidence of that is the fact that a 6 and 7 seed advanced in the first round. It's reminding me of 2 years ago, and we saw 2 years ago the Western Conference was uninspiring. The Clippers won like 44 games, and that was enough to stay out the playing tournament safely. They were a 5 seed 2 years
mhm,
ago. It took 50
yeah,
wins to stay out the playing tournament this year. But again, like, I don't. I feel like a lot of all these teams in the West outside of Oklahoma City had stretches where they just felt like they were underachieving. They felt like they were flawed. Like the Timberwolves felt like they weren't playing as well as they were when they were the top defense in the league and went to the conference finals. The Mavericks made a big trade. The Lakers, they made several trades, whereas they were found it difficult to make trades in years past. The Golden State Warriors were literally under 500 when Jimmy Butler started playing for them.
yeah. T
You know,
Wolves struggling beginning of the season.
yeah. So, like, the West, even the Nuggets, and I'm sure we'll get to the Nuggets, but they literally fired not just their head coach, but their general manager, like after April started. No
Yeah.
team does that, and there were teams that felt like they were good enough to do something in the West, but also unsettled enough to shake things up in a big way. And so, I mean, compared to a lot of those teams, the Clippers had a dream season as far as like minimizing drama, overperforming, and having a bunch of guys who individually could feel like they did really well this year. And it's you know, they did not have a successful postseason, but this was a good team to cover this regular season, and that's rare. It's something that you can't take for granted because I've seen that team have regular seasons that they're proud of, and then the next year they think it's going to be the same, and for a variety of reasons, it's not.
Well, let's go into that then. So Denver and the way the season ended for the Clippers, they were 52-30 throughout the regular season. Obviously, overachieved as far as expectations were concerned. They go into the playoffs against the Denver Nuggets team, where I think it's safe to say a lot of teams favored the Clippers over the Nuggets based off of that stretch towards the end of the season. They ended the season the way they didn't want to end it, and of course, you being, in the press conference, you asked some questions to Kawhi, and what was the energy that he kind of gave off, not with just the question, but what could you really read of his body language of, what would it be something from here on out, how he's looking at the situation with the Clippers, asking about James Harden in the future, asking about why the Nuggets, won the game. They weren't 30 points better than them. So what was your vibe with Kawhi in that press conference after game 7?
With just Kawhi, I mean, well, if it's just Kawhi, um, I mean that dude took 5 years to be in a spot where he could talk about his team's final game of the season. I mean, the time before that was the bubble, and I wasn't in the bubble. Like a lot of people were thinking about basketball September of 2020. Let's just be real, with everything that was going on in the world. And so um, this was a spot that Kawhi hasn't been in, honestly, I want to say since 2016. Because if you think about it, in 2017, he got hurt, you know. Zaza Pachulia slid his foot under Kawhi's ankle game 1 of the Western Conference Finals that year. Spurs were killing the Warriors, and then the Warriors came back after Kawhi couldn't return, and that wound up being a sweep. Kawhi didn't talk in 2017. 2018, he only played 9 games and none after January of that season. The Spurs were out in round 1. Kawhi never played again for the Spurs. He won a championship in 2019, so what you saw was a parade. 2020 was the bubble. 2021, he tears his ACL. 2022, the Clippers don't even make the playoffs. Kawhi never played a game that year. 23, plays 2 games, tears his meniscus, done. Doesn't talk the last game because he's not playing. And we all saw what happened last year, 2024. So to work back and to lose a game 7 in the way that they did, like there's this confluence of, I'm sure Kawhi is appreciative to have gotten to this point and to be healthy going into this offseason, but to work that hard to not win a playoff series, to not win a round at all, it's really disheartening. And it's individually, I think Kawhi has a lot to feel good about. But as far as this team, it's a mixed bag. You're at a crossroads because just because you accomplished, I just mentioned it, just because you accomplished a lot over the course of the season, both with and without Kawhi, we all know that it doesn't work like that going into the next year. You have to reestablish yourself, and this team doesn't have a lot of guys on a trajectory that makes you feel good about them maintaining that kind of performance without something else happening. So, um, you know, Kawhi's got that was on his mind immediately, and maybe maybe it won't be on his mind as much in September when if he can get help, if he can be healthy, uh, get stronger, and be ready to start the season. But it's going to be on everybody's mind. Even if the Clippers duplicate this performance in the regular season, what will change about the playoffs, especially if they have to
Hmm.
come across the Nuggets again?
Yeah, yeah, and so that's why I wanted to piggyback off. Is there a level of uncertainty um, that you feel is in Kawhi's mind that he can win with this team? Because, like you said, the season is cool. Like they can have a good regular season record. We've seen that last 5 seasons, but in the playoffs, obviously the goal is to win a championship. And not only that, I don't know exactly what really is the standard for the Clippers anymore. I don't know what is it that they're really trying to accomplish. So you think Kawhi's mind, he's kind of uncertain on what the future plan is, as far as how far this team can go.
I think that Kawhi trusts this organization. I think they know what the deal is with where the Clippers are at. It's disappointing because of how well they played and because of how healthy they were. The standard for the Clippers is very clear, actually. I don't think there's any confusion there. They're trying to win and compete. They're not trying to be in a spot where, first of all, they can't blow it up. They can't reset. They have zero incentive to do that. And then more importantly, even if they wanted to, like they wouldn't be able to effectively do it. They have vets who don't really have trade value. They don't have draft picks that allow you to actually, reset. The best thing you can do is to compete and put the best team possible. And the only thing the Clippers got unlucky with is maybe they got unlucky with their performances at the end of specific games, and they picked the wrong team to think that they had an extended margin of error against. Like in general, you want to play against a team that is in somewhat a state of disarray, and the defense is as bad as Denver was. But the issue that I think the Clippers players and coaches underestimated is just how motivated that Denver Nuggets team was to beat the Clippers, specifically given how the Clippers approached the beginning of the series. The Nuggets were not the better team over the first 4 games of the series. They were the
Mhm.
better team over the last 3 games of the series.
Yeah,
Everything in that series flipped when Aaron Gordon hit that alley oop dunk. It inspired them. It energized them. It gave them. I already thought the Nuggets had an intangibles advantage, and once they tied the series, Denver went from bickering with each other and being somewhat splintered and somewhat vulnerable to a team that was like, we're going to go home, get some rest, and beat these dudes. 2 out of 3 games, and that's what happened. So the Clippers, I think the only thing that confuses people is when you talk about wanting to win a championship and then you're not winning playoff series. That gets confusing for people because, I don't think everyone has a lot
very,
of time for nuance.
very.
But the nuance is important here. The context is important. Like the team wasn't expected to do anything as far as making a run in the playoffs this year. They wanted to be competitive more than they expected to be "quote unquote" contenders. I think that's toughest on James Harden and Kawhi Leonard. But Kawhi signed his contract, and we'll see what happens with James. For James, he's going to sign back up, and he's going to be a part of this again. And those guys are bridges. And best case scenario, those guys are part of the next contender of the LA Clippers. But the tough thing for those guys that they're going to have to sit and deal with is because of the stages of the careers that they're in, they are part of helping the Clippers be competitive while they attract potentially the guys who are going to replace them.
Well, I want to address a comment right here that Fred Kepner said, and we're gonna go into the interview with Lawrence Frank as well, and I want to touch on Tyron Lue as well. But he says, is there any possibility for the Clippers to possibly sign a third star based off of the career places where Kawhi and James are in? Um, Kawhi obviously had a great stint towards the end of the season as well as James, but I think what Kawhi said in that interview when you asked him about how you feel like what you can James can build on, he kind of seemed like he was kind of dismissive of the question and needed more time to think about it. Do you think that was more so just Kawhi being Kawhi, just giving a calculated answer? Was him trying to actually he's not sure about having James as being a second star with him, and they probably will need a third star. Is that even plausible?
I don't think it's plausible given the state of the CBA that we're in, and again, the goal that the Clippers are trying to, maintain some flexibility so that when they can get someone that is more along the timeline of trying to, build a sustainable contender. I think that's what they're trying to make sure that they take care of. Like rushing into guys is how you trade for Paul George and give up on Shea and 7 years worth of draft picks, right? So I think Kawhi, the thing with him is he doesn't sugarcoat, right? He is always going to be he's going to tell you what's on his mind, and if he feels a certain type of way, it might come off as blunt and honest. When we were in Hawaii for training camp and he was asked, I'm pretty sure I asked a question about what he's seeing from other guys. Like, he pretty much was like, yeah, we got some new guys. We got some guys who can defend maybe, but I'm not impressed yet, you know?
Do you
And
think he
guys
was
that he
ever
plays,
impressed? Do you think he was ever impressed?
yeah, he definitely was. These guys made an impression on Kawhi over the course of the year. It inspired him. He discussed that pretty openly too. You know, these guys like Kawhi was effusive in his praise for guys like Chris Dunn. Um, he talked to Pat Bev about Chris Dunn on the side, but he talked to us about him. Like Kawhi was really upset that Chris Dunn wasn't going to, because of CBA restrictions or whatever, Chris wasn't eligible for postseason recognition, specifically all defense. For a guy like Kawhi, he's not the most effusive with praise of others. That was significant. So with James, it's a matter of they just lost. That's fresh. That's raw. That's not even anything they can do anything about for months. The next regular season, the next training camp doesn't start until another 5 months from now. So for Kawhi, he's got to be disappointed looking at his co-star not rise to the occasion. And at this stage of his career, it's like, yeah, like, am I going to be healthy next year? Are you going to be healthy next year? Is this team going to be good enough to even be in a spot to do something? This wasn't just about them losing a series. They had a chance to win a series. All they had to do,
Yeah,
not
they were
minimizing it, but
favored.
all they had to do is win a road game, in a game 7, and those dudes probably packed for Oklahoma City. I know I did. So I think that's really what it is for Kawhi. Like, all these guys, they can't take for granted where they are. They're on borrowed time. I've wrote about it multiple times over the course of this playoffs, and the disappointment is so much more profound when you have guys that are at the end of their careers, in the twilight of their primes, and they're good enough to do something special. You clearly saw the work that was put in, the work that we could see apparently, and also the work behind the scenes that we don't get to see. All that work, when it leads to a familiar, disappointing result, it gets harder. And at least Kawhi got up there to express that. That's more than James
And
did.
that's what I'm about to say too. Like, would you bring, based off of what you said about your second co-star not showing up, he is getting older. You can say the regular season he carried his weight, but as teams it gets tougher, like you said, based off of just not only what was on the court, but James not showing up for 3 separate post games after a loss. Honestly, what would you think, and how would you feel about bringing and trusting that, or would you explore other options if you're Kawhi?
I don't think Kawhi can explore other options. He, like I said, not only is he signed for 2 years, but like, I don't think that there's a team out there that would take him on, like, just based off of his medical history. Like, the only team that has ever traded to acquire Kawhi Leonard is the Toronto Raptors. They got him for 1 year. They had to load manage him. That was 7 years ago. And it was successful, but they also lost him because Kawhi wanted to come to LA. He wanted to come home. Like just a, that was three knee procedures ago. You know what I mean? Like we gotta look at it that way. So Kawhi's going to be here. I don't anticipate a relationship breakdown that would change that because that's what it would take. It's not a hey Kawhi, we want you to get a ring somewhere else. Like the Clippers are not in the business of doing that, and the Clippers aren't in the business of messing up their relationship with their stars. Like they haven't done something like that since Blake Griffin, and they learned from Blake Griffin. They were embarrassed about what happened with Blake Griffin and the fallout there. I think they're still trying to repair that relationship. They're not going to do that with Kawhi Leonard, a guy who is from here, wanted to come here, who has sacrificed a lot to be here. And obviously, the Clippers sacrificed a lot for Kawhi to be here as well. At least for next year, they're in it. When it comes to James, again, I think Matt Barnes said a year or two ago when James got traded, you only had so many wiggles. And, I look at the Houston Rockets. The Houston Rockets are supposed to have James Harden right now instead of Fred VanVleet. If the Rockets hired anybody but Ime Udoka, then James probably would have got the bag in Houston, and you see what happens from there. Instead, James gets traded to the Clippers. He signs a new contract that actually gives him a chance to opt in or opt out this year, this offseason. And I'm not seriously considering what it would look like for the Clippers to move on from James because, again, we got to keep that same energy. James didn't finish the postseason like he needed to finish it. It's not something we haven't seen before. Like you got to be naive to do that. But at the same time, they're not even in this position without James either. You move on from James Harden, there's no replacement there. There's no get another star point guard or change your whole no, like that's not how this shit works. And everyone knows that. I think James knows that. I'm interested to see how he comes back, but he'll be back. And you need him back. But you need to change things around the stars if you're going to change your results in the playoffs. And so I don't look at that being a James Harden, Kawhi Leonard thing. I think of that as who are the supporting cast and how is that going to change? And you're
Let's go
definitely
into
muted.
yeah. Let's go into another aspect of the coaching. Ty Lue spoke after, as well. And I thought he was just very interesting how he responded to the questions, especially the one where he said he was thinking about OKC, which to me is almost, overlooking Denver, which you obviously can't do. Ty Lue's been in for 5 seasons, and he's been mixed in with injuries and the situations that he was out of his control. You finally get a healthy team, fully healthy. Kawhi's playing at an all NBA team level. James Harden's playing at a borderline All-Star level. What do you go? Where do you go at right now with Tyron Lue, and what explanation does he have for how he lost that series? And if he does have an explanation, like, please explain it to me.
Well, for one, that quote about thinking about OKC. I mean, um, the question was about what does the offseason look for him. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people saw the quote, and it's like, well, the question specifically asked him, when what do you take away from this season? What does the offseason look for you? That's why Tyronn Lue said, I haven't thought about the offseason, to be honest. I thought about OKC. Because Tyronn Lue's plan was to obviously win game 7, like he always had. Tyronn Lue was 4-0 in game 7s before they lost this past weekend. And Tyronn Lue was not thinking about, I'm thinking about the offseason. It's like, not, he's the coach. He just lost 2. He was thinking about the next team that if you win this game, you got 48 hours to prepare for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And you're not thinking about an offseason. You're not thinking, oh, my team's going to lose this game. What do we need to fix in the offseason? He's thinking, we're going to win this game and we're going to go on and we're going to play a game one in 48 hours. And that's obviously not what happened. And that's disappointing for him. And so, you got people who, we can be accountable about who the head coach was on both of these teams and say that Tyron Lue had a disappointing series and David Adelman literally secured a coaching job with what he was able to do in this series. I think um, people are really dismissive of coaching and how hard that is, what it all means, how it matters. You know, Tyron Lue is the reason why Jeff Van Gundy was on the staff, and then there's people who are like, well, fire Tyron Lue and have Jeff Van Gundy run the team, but no one was saying that Jeff Van Gundy isn't right for his position just because the Nuggets scored like 131 points in game five. The Nuggets completely destroyed the Clippers defense. I think everyone's got to be accountable whether they have success or failures. So the Clippers failed in the playoffs. And at the same time, there are organizations that would look at that and they're like, fire the head coach, and trade everybody. This isn't that organization. It hasn't been that organization under Steve Ballmer. You want to take up the Clippers not blowing it up, take it up with Steve Ballmer. If you want to take up the Clippers having good relationships up and down the brain trust between ownership and the front office and the coaching staff, take it up with Steve Ballmer because Steve Ballmer is more interested in having a stable group that he feels good working with and empowering them. More importantly, it's not just about having a good relationship. You keep people accountable, but you also put them in position to do their best work. And Steve Ballmer's done that. Like T. Lue got paid last year, and the same people who are saying that Tyronn Lue wasn't capable of having a winning season with this Clippers team, they won 50 games. I don't think people keep that same energy. So they failed this postseason. I keep saying I think they underestimated aspects of the Denver Nuggets. I think they respected plenty. You respect Nikola Jokic and you respect what the Nuggets have accomplished, but I don't think they respected what Russ's impact was going to be in the series. I don't think they respected Denver's defense, and I don't think I just feel like there were lapses that when the Clippers did have an advantage in the series, they didn't fully take advantage of. They will regret that, and they will regret it until they're able to either beat the Nuggets or get further than the Nuggets in the playoff series. Things that won't be answered for a year. But in that year, Tyronn Lue is still going to be the head coach of the team, and honestly, that's better for the Clippers than any coaching change would do.
Well, before we go into that, what would you change anything as far as the Clippers going into next season? Because and this goes back to what the end goal is. I mean, they've been a great regular season team for like since Ty Lue's been here, with and without their stars being hurt. So at what point does it become okay? We gotta take the next step, and we gotta go into trying to get to a championship level. While they've competed for that, absolutely, but what is it that they need to do, and what should they change, or should they stand pat to what they have right now? What would you change as far as with the Clippers team? Is it from coaching, from ownership, from the players? Like, would you change anything with what the Clippers have right now after what you saw?
I mean, honestly, if you understand what they're trying to do over the long term, they had a really successful year. They had a year that was a part of their plan. I think fans look at everything as championship or bust, and if it's championship or bust, people want to bust like extra hard, and that's just not this where this team is at. This team is a team in transition. I think people who've read what I've written over the years, especially going into this season and coming out of this season, I think they are actually on the right track. If you're trying to win a championship in 2026, then I don't think you have the I don't think you have the personnel to do that. Your stars are just too old. there's not a single team playing in right now that is relying on old stars except Golden State. And Golden State is praying that they survive Minnesota without Stephen Curry for a week, because Stephen Curry, it finally happened after 16 NBA seasons, but he's got a hamstring strain that's going to take him out for a week of playoff games. And again, I just feel like I think people would have been there. There's some people who can't stand the Clippers and would have wanted them to lose 50 games, and at that point, or to have been swept in this first round series against the Nuggets. That right there, I think would have been like, oh yeah, like it's easier to move on from certain things after that. I think the Clippers can optimize their roster a little bit better. They were fine this regular season not having that big bodied player at the forward position, both with and without Kawhi, because of one, how well Vince Zubac's played. I think James Harden played his role really well on the defensive end this year. Like, you have to acknowledge that they were a top 5 defense and not 5. And over the course of a regular season, they put together a group that played hard and executed well enough to be successful in the regular season. In this particular playoff matchup, that margin for error disappeared, and they would have won. They would have won if they would have taken care of certain things. If you take care of the basketball, if you box out, if you get back on defense, those kinds of things. Them not being able to do that, that is where it's like you're going to need that bigger body forward, if you will, if you're going to be able to get through specific playoff matchups. But I think that you have to have a team that can get through 82 games, and then you hope to have the roster that can beat multiple good teams in 7-game series. I think the biggest guy to watch is Norman Powell. He's extension eligible. He had an outstanding season. He could have been an all-star, but I think everything that happened from the All-Star break on are the things that give you kind of pause, concern. He is 6'4". He is going to be 32 this month. He is going to be looking at, you look at the last 4 years, the only year that he's played more than 62 games. In other words, the only year he didn't miss 20 or more games was last year, when he played 76, when everybody was reasonably healthy during the season, but obviously Kawhi's knee gave out. So the question there is, as good as Norm is, what do you do with him? Do you extend him? Do you keep him and let his contract expire? Do you trade him in the offseason? Do you have him start the year, and do you trade him at the deadline for the best situation available there? Maybe you use Norm's contract to get that power forward. There are so many different ways to go. I would bring Norman into the season. I'm not sure I would extend him. I would only look at an extension if it keeps the flexibility. Everything with the Clippers is flexibility. What kind of team are you going to be to start the year? What kind of team are you going to be when it's February and you got to think about, the trade deadline? You saw how it was for the Clippers this year. Like, it's like, okay, start the year without Kawhi, and then Kawhi's back February, and you're thinking, how are you going to change the roster to give yourself the best chance in the playoffs? That's how Terrence Mann got traded. That's how you wound up getting Bogdan Bogdanovic on your team and Ben Simmons on your team, and it didn't work out. It worked out for the regular season. It just didn't work out for this playoff. So
Yeah.
Norman Powell is probably your pressure point as far as something that has to be addressed, if not to begin the year. You have to think about that for next winter.
Okay. So let's get into Lawrence Frank. You had exit interview on Monday morning, and the roster construction. I want to talk about the roster construction and putting the pieces around, the star power. When you asked Lawrence Frank about, if you correct me if I'm wrong, was it about the kind of how the roster was constructed about, going into the next following years, and would there be something that you change? Do you feel like you got really a definite answer from Lawrence? And what else in the interview really stood out as far as, how they're constructing the roster around Kawhi? Do you think they're headed towards the right direction, or do you think they're going backwards? Like, what do you think they're doing?
I don't think, like I said, I think the progress is good. I can't tell you how many people saw Paul George leave and wrote the Clippers off as far as being relevant in the West. And when I say relevant in the West, I mean a good team that can make the playoffs and still be competitive, you know? So, uh, again, I just feel like people don't get fired after they win 15 more games than they were expected to win. Like, that doesn't happen. And so, like, anyone who looked at the roster the Clippers had late in the summer and said that roster is winning 50 games is capping. Like, let's just be real about that. Now, I asked Lawrence Frank two completely unrelated questions. The first one is probably the one that you're talking about, BJ, and that was, do you what level of consideration do you give to one of Kawhi or James not being on the team? And that was more about, I kind of already know the plan there. You know, the plan is for both of those guys to be on the team. So we don't need a confirmation of that, more or less. I was more interested in how Lawrence was going to answer that question as it relates to giving any pause to one of those guys moving on from them. And that player option is James's decision more than it is the Clippers for right now. And the thing with James is, what does he do? Does he opt in? Does he want more money? Will he opt out and take less money? Does he want to trade? I can tell you, James is not trying to get traded. Like, he wants to be in LA. He has a lot of reasons to be in LA, right? So, like, James is really proud of what he was able to do with this team over the course of the season. That's not to say that James is proud of how this postseason went. Clearly, he wasn't. So, um, and the answer that Lawrence gave me, pretty much, it gave Lawrence an opportunity to praise his guys, like, and to say that he expects those guys to be back, that he respects that. For James, it's a decision that he has to make first. But for Kawhi, it's 2 years. And so 2 years means he's definitely going to be on the team next year. And then you reassess with a year left on his deal what happens there. So, um, everything for me when it comes to the Clippers going into this offseason is, what are you doing around those guys? What are you doing around James and Kawhi? If those guys are going to be there, and you know that one's got severe durability issues and the other is about to be in his 17th NBA season with the workload that he's had over these years, it's like you can't expect a whole lot different. You're not going to expect James to all of a sudden stop getting tired at the end of games. You're not going to expect Kawhi to play 60 games, or at least you shouldn't. And if that's going to be the case, it's about everybody else around those guys. And so I think Lawrence just pretty much made it clear that that's his team. That's the core. They want another shot at seeing that core play more together. I think that's reasonable. They didn't play that many games together. They played 26 games together when you talk about James, Kawhi, Norm, if it's Zubats. Um, that's a pretty good foundation to be competitive. Are they contenders? I don't think every year you go in saying you're a contender. That is going to be the hardest thing for Clipper fans to kind of reconcile with, and it's going to be the hardest thing for James and Kawhi to reconcile with. And Kawhi can't do anything about it. Deal's done. If Kawhi wants to be here, then that's the reality for him. The
But do
the
you
calculus is
think?
with James and his
I don't mean to
contract.
interrupt. Do you think though? And Kawhi is hard. Obviously, Kawhi is a person that's not going to let you in. But when he does talk, I do listen, and we can both agree. I think that Kawhi wants to win at the highest level. I mean, 2 championships and playing for winning franchises, being a third all time, winning percentage. Like, the man's about all winning. While the comfort of LA is here, his family's here. He wanted to come home. the tenure hasn't worked. The Clippers seem to be more focused on. I don't think they're entirely sure that this team is going to be looking to compete for a title. At what point do you think Kawhi is looking at like the comfort of being home? Is it worth me not looking to extend my legacy and win a championship?
The legacy for Kawhi, honestly, I don't think Kawhi cares about that stuff. I think Kawhi cares about winning, but I also think that Kawhi understands that for him specifically, you can get traded, man, and the situation has to be right. Like Kawhi's on a max deal, and Kawhi has not played a lot of games on that max deal. To keep Kawhi healthy requires a great synergy with an organization and also the flexibility of that organization to allow you to be able to recover it and to strengthen and to get outside opinions and all that. Like there's a lot of teams that don't operate like that. There's a lot of teams that have dissension in their brain trust in one form or another. Kawhi understands that. Like Kawhi has actually been pretty fortunate with the organizations he's been on. San Antonio was pretty well put together. He understands that. That's his original one. He was in Toronto for a year, and they did a really good job for that 1 year. And then he's been with the Clippers. Like it's you can't take for granted that if you're Kawhi, you go somewhere and it's like a team is going to have to give up something to get you. And then are you in such a good place that you can give something up, integrate Kawhi and how he plays the game, as well as take care of Kawhi? I think Kawhi understands that the chances of that happening just to say that you're chasing a championship can go sideways. Like he saw what happened when Paul George got here. It's like, oh yeah, of course, bring Paul George here, give up assets, and then all of a sudden, Paul George, his durability declines as soon as he leaves OKC. Look at what happened with Damian Lillard. Damian Lillard gets paid. Blazers draft his replacement. Dame's like open to being traded. He gets traded to a Milwaukee Bucks team with literally one of the top 5 players in the NBA, and they not only don't win a playoff series, but now Dame has a career-altering injury himself. Like Kawhi's already had his career-altering injuries, so that's the difficult thing with Kawhi, and that's why I keep saying it's the hardest on Kawhi and James because all they are playing for is a championship. You can every single game James Harden plays, he's passing somebody on an all-time list. James doesn't care. James wants to win a championship, but at the same time, it's like you're not getting traded to a team that has assets, and is terrible because you can't win with that team. You can't get traded to a mid team, a team that isn't really a contender right now, because what are they going to give up to get you and actually be able to say we're going to be better? And then the teams that are contenders, they don't need you. Like, what's in it for them to acquire you just because you're quote unquote ring chasing? Everyone knows that. So like, unless you're at the point of a contract where you're willing to give up all kinds of money just to go ring chase, you're better off staying with the LA Clippers and maximizing what you got and hoping that you get into the playoffs, you get a better matchup maybe, you have a slightly better regular season, so maybe game 7 is on your home floor, and you take your best shot from there. That's what's tough. I think the Clippers understand that. I think their stars understand that. And I'm not really under this kind of pretense where everybody's like, if you don't win, you got to get traded. Like that's unlikely to happen. So it's not really a conversation I'm entertaining that much this offseason.
All right. Well, let me get a few people because they want to ask a few questions to you. Let me ask this one right here. Old man asked us a question. He said, how can you resign a one-way player with defensive deficiencies, Harden, but let a two-way player in PG get away? Make it make sense. Come on, Frank.
I don't know if old man watched Paul George the last 2 years. So like they didn't let Paul George, well, you could say they let him walk away, but one thing Lawrence Frank did bring up Monday is that they offered Paul George a 3-year deal to stay, and he would have been a part of this Clippers team. Now, if Paul George would have stayed, then it changes how the Clippers were built. But if you got the season from Paul George this year with the Clippers that Paul George submitted in Philadelphia, the Clippers are in a world of hurt. I think one of the issues with people watching the game is we look at who these guys used to be and the version of that player, and we assess them that way. Like, we'll look at Paul George and be like, oh yeah, he's still that guy who was with the Thunder and finished top 3 in MVP and Defensive Player of the Year. Like, Paul George is not that guy. He hasn't been that guy really since he left OKC, and he's not even the player for Philly that he was for the Clippers over the last few years. And, who does Paul George guard? Paul's not trying to take on that responsibility at this stage of his career. And really, it's because he doesn't really have that ability anymore. Paul can help you defensively, but Paul's not the kind of two-way star that he used to be. Paul's paint production declined with the Clippers. The Clippers, we all saw that. We all saw that James Harden actually helped make things easier on Paul in terms of getting him great shots. Like, if you look at the offense that the Clippers had in 23-24, that should help Paul more than Paul helped the Clippers in a big way. When Kawhi went down and you had a playoff series against the Dallas Mavericks and you needed Paul to step up, Paul wasn't able to do that. Now he goes to Philadelphia. Big fella ain't there for the most part. He didn't even make it to 20 games, Joel Embiid. And Paul wasn't able to up his performance. Paul was kind of stuck with what he's capable of doing at this stage of his career. Now, flip it back and you look at James Harden. It's like, why are you keeping James Harden when you were like, hey, we don't need Paul George. We can let him go. Well, simply put, Paul George is easier to replace than James Harden is. Paul George literally had his role usurped by Norman Powell. And you saw, especially when Kawhi was out and when Norm was healthy, how good Norm was in a similar role. Look at Norman Powell's numbers pre-All-Star break this year compared to Paul George's numbers the previous year. They're very similar when it comes to two things: putting the ball in the basket and shooting efficiency. Now, is Norman Powell as good of a player as Paul George is when Paul George is at his best? No, but Norman Powell is probably about as good as Paul George is as of right now, because who gets more pressure on the rim? Who's going to actually play more games? Norm missed a lot of games last year, but not as much as Paul did, when you look at that value of it. And there's a reason I asked Lawrence this question, and there's a reason why Lawrence was like, no, we're not entertaining that right now. If you let James Harden go, then you can say, oh, look, we can get younger and we can get a point guard in there who's better defensively, and we can just have a different, play through someone else that's not James Harden. And you'd be right. You can do that. But I think you got to really look at this basic tenet. No team that has let James Harden go in the short term has been better for it. Okay? None of them. OKC, when they let James Harden, BJ, I don't know if you signed up for history, but we're going to talk some basketball history, all right? If you don't mind.
That's my favorite subject.
When the Oklahoma City Thunder traded James Harden, James was sixth man of the year for a team that won the Western Conference. I think everyone looked at that team in the finals in 2012 and were like, they're going to get back to another finals with these group of guys at some point, Never happened. They traded him to Houston, and the Thunder never made it out the West again with those guys. With the Houston Rockets traded James in 2020 or, January 2021, but we all knew he was pretty much done after the bubble with Houston. It took Houston 5 years to make it back to the playoffs. Okay. And even with them making it back as a 2 seed, they failed to get out the first round. Brooklyn Nets, when they had James Harden, James had a busted hamstring and played in a game 7 with KD. And, they were a shoe size or two away from making the conference finals in the East against an Atlanta Hawks team that upset the Philadelphia 76ers, right? And if the Nets were fully healthy, the Nets were the best team in the East. talent-wise. But they traded James and forget a playoff series. They never won another playoff game. They got swept back-to-back years, and now the Nets are where they are now. The Sixers traded James, and again, the Sixers they messed up the playoffs against Boston. Had a 3-2 lead, had a lead in this fourth quarter, Game 6, and they wind up blowing it. James and Joel didn't show up for that Game 7. Tatum drops 51 on them, and then next thing you know, like Philadelphia is where they are now. Um, like in the short term, you're not better. And maybe that helps the Clippers. Maybe it's like, hey, reimagine a team without James. But I don't think that's how these teams want to operate. Like if it's a Zubats would hate to lose James Harden. We all were inspired by the kind of season Zoo had, and at the same time, I think we can all appreciate that a lot of Zoo's offensive improvement from a production standpoint had to do with James Harden being the guy getting him the ball in the spots that he was getting him the ball in. So it's a dilemma. It's a nasty place to be. I get that. And so everyone has to kind of like acknowledge that you can let James Harden go and you got to figure out how the heck you're going to build around that again. And this isn't the NBA isn't lose a star, just get a guy back. Guys aren't available like that. There's nobody who's going to be a free agent who's like, oh yeah, put them in and they're going to play point guard like James Harden or play point guard at a high level. James was really good this past year. He just wasn't good in the playoffs, and you're going to have to rectify that. That's how it's going to be until James is on the team. And anyone bringing up Russ, it's like you got to understand, like Russ is not a starting point guard. So you can say, oh, you could have just had Russell Westbrook. It's like the Denver Nuggets don't ask Russell Westbrook to be their primary playmaker. They don't even ask him to be their secondary playmaker. They have Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, and they ask Russ to go in and do what Russ said he's there to do, which is fuck shit up. Like that's what Russ does. But it's like when the Clippers acquired James, they acquired a completely different player, and they acquired a player that was going to basically enable them to have an offense for the last 2 seasons. And there's not a single NBA team that asks Russell Westbrook to do that, and at least over the course of a full season. And that's where we are. It's like, what kind of player are you building your offense around? Who you're playing through? And we have to discuss who those kind of players are that fulfill those roles. I don't think the Clippers are interested in replacing that player right now.
I think the main thing, like with Norm, like the scoring aspect may be close to PG, but as far as the numbers, but the other things that PG brings to the table, the defense, the rebounding, the playmaking, those are things that Norm just can't replicate. I mean, first off, even the mismatch, like PG's a mismatch in all 3 levels. Norm at times, a lot of times, is a guy that is a head first guy. Wants to score the ball. That's pretty much when his shot ain't falling. He can't really do much of everything else. That's what we saw a lot in the Denver series. Like the physical size of Denver, I think, just overwhelmed Norm, especially in that Game 7. Game 6, he played very well, but when his shot isn't falling, he's not hitting jumpers. The game becomes very hard with him, and that's why I think we seen this year. Yeah, you did what you did in the regular season, granted, but if you're talking about let's see if you can replace Paul George in your addition by subtraction, that has to be replicated in the playoffs. So I think that was the biggest eye-opening for Norm, for me, that he can't be a second option. I don't think he can be even a third option on a championship team. As far as Harden goes, I think it's the same thing. Offensively, you get a lot from him as far as how he runs his systems and how he plays the ball through him. Very similar to LeBron. They play exactly the same way. Luka Doncic plays exactly the same way. And okay, that's good. But what happens on the defensive side when you get, your liability backdoor, or you can't guard on ball, like those things and the intangibles as well. I think Russ in that, especially in that series, he showed the intangibles where I think he bred life into Denver. I don't think they win that series without him. And I think
Oh, they
he took
definitely
it.
will.
So,
They
and I
definitely
think
will.
that I think that James let his team down in game 7, and then to him not to even show up to a press conference 3 straight games, that I didn't really care for, because it's like, okay, you have a bad game, you're disappointed. I give you grace probably one time, but when you do it 2, 3 times and then show your hand, and then a guy like Russ, who pretty much I think pretty much took their heart in that game 7, especially just how he was talking and taunting. It's just like at that right there, to me, I look at the intangibles Russ has that I in Harden's 16-year career, why he has the talent, why he has the offensive game, the intangibles is what separates from me. That are you a championship type of player that wants to win, or are you a guy that wants to entertain? You
Yeah,
can go to
but the thing with Russ is you don't compare him to James. You compare him to Chris Dunn. Like that's the role. When you look at this series, Russ is not there to be the engine of Denver's offense. He is there to be a supporting player to the guys that Denver plays through. And Russ did that at an extremely high level on both ends of the floor. Russ shot the three well. Russ made things happen in transition, and Russ blew up the Clippers' offense in numerous ways. When you look at how you're building your roster, you know, you look at Paul. Going back to Paul, it's like what Paul earned because of what he's done over the course of his career and the level that he played at last year. He now is a $50 million player. When it comes to Norm, it's a matter of this. If production is similar and roles are similar, but one guy is making 20 million, not even, and another is at 50 million and older and north, we're talking like he's going to, that's the escalating salary as he advances through his 30s. That's what you got to consider. You're taking the $20 million guy who can produce similarly and you can get other better players on the team over the $50 million guy who it's that guy and a bunch of minimums around him. And that's how the Clippers built their roster this year. With the Nuggets, it's the same thing. It's like if you have Russell Westbrook on a minimum contract and you got all these other guys to support Russ accordingly so that Russ's deficiencies don't matter as much and that Russ's attributes actually lead to winning, you'll take that. And the Clippers underestimated Russ. They underestimated him in this playoffs.
that was crazy.
And
That was crazy.
he made them pay. But the question with Russ is never going to be Russ or James. It's more like Russell Westbrook or Chris Dunn. And Chris didn't have a good playoffs. Chris had an outstanding regular season. Chris earned a starting job over the course of this regular season. He made Terrence Mann expendable, but in this playoffs, Chris couldn't guard Jamal Murray. Chris couldn't make shots. He couldn't provide spacing for the Clippers when the Nuggets were overplaying Kawhi and James. And even in Game 7, while Russ came off the bench and ran laps around the Clippers in that second quarter, Chris came in and once he missed a layup and missed a three, um, the Clippers had to get Chris Dunn out the game. It's differences like that, and so again though, like James has a much different role and responsibility, and that would have been the case even if Russ was on this year's team. And big reason why Russ wasn't on this team was simply put, Russ's passion is something that a team has to be able to handle, and the Clippers determined that they weren't trying to deal with it this year, for better or for worse. And the Nuggets, honestly, there were moments where it was a struggle for the Nuggets, but they're not struggling with it right now.
Yeah, I think I said on your space, I had that series going 6 or 7. I kept hearing 5, and I was like, no, it's a 6-7 game series for sure. But I had a question. Matt has a question. He said, Law Murray, at any point in the season, did you feel like the Clippers front office felt like they had enough to compete for a championship? Was the expectation, you think, too high or too low?
Well, if you're going to ask me what the front office thinks, I mean, I think the front office felt like they could make a run, based off of how the team was playing and if they were going to be healthy. So that's why it's really disappointing that this season ended the way it did. But I don't think the front office went into this season realistically thinking they could compete for a championship. I think and you couldn't. Kawhi wasn't healthy. You know what I mean? And and you just had guys that needed to come together. I felt like they were optimistic that they were going to be good and competitive. And that optimism was validated. Like they were good. They were competitive. They earned the fifth seed. But I think as they zoom out and look back, it's like you weren't close. So I think they could have done better than they did in the playoffs. That's what the front office believed. But I don't think the front office thought that going into this season they were a championship team, and I don't think that they certainly can't feel that way after the way the playoffs went.
I'm gonna get a couple more questions, and I know you gotta get going, Law, so I'm not gonna hold you too much longer. But as that's coming, off-season moves coming, roster construction coming, free agency moves coming. Are there any free agents personally you think that would fit with the Clippers right now that they need? What are the Clippers missing right now?
The Clippers, if Lawrence Frank is going to be the one to tell it, there's a list of attributes, and so you gotta have to figure out exactly who fits those attributes. Number one on the list is ball handling. They need ball handling relief. I feel like when you look at the Clippers, their Achilles heel was turnovers, especially before Kawhi started playing at a high level again. And that's ironic, being that James Harden is your point guard. Like James turns the ball over a ton, but I think it's a matter of supporting players. There's so much pressure on James to play because like you didn't have another true point guard on the roster. You didn't treat Chris Dunn like that, right? Like you treated Chris Dunn more like a wing, more like a 3-and-D wing. And Chris did the defensive part extremely well. So if you're going to look at what kind of player they need, they always look at positional size. Like what kind of bigger player is confident with their handle and can be able to be a legitimate point guard for them. Number two is front court help. And that one's complicated because, this is a Clippers team that has never really emphasized athletic size, especially at the power forward position. They emphasize skill. I think anybody they bring in, they want to be able to be confident in their shot, especially if they're not a center. But I do think of the kind of center that would fit the Clippers perfectly is someone who could shoot and play next to Victor Zubac, but also be able to play in place of Victor Zubac. The only other player besides James who you're like, man, if this guy can't go, what are we going to do? Was Zoo. Like Zoo had to play so much, and not just so many games, but the minutes. Like Zoo played more minutes than he's ever played. And the Clippers were fortunate that they never really needed to have that player, but that's the kind of player. I don't think he's I wonder if he would be available. Naz Reid is kind of big that the Clippers have not really had that they could really use. A guy who could come off the bench, be a 5, but also could play next to someone like Zoo as a forward. That kind of player going to be available. Don't know what it would take to actually secure him, but that's the archetype. It's hard to figure out exactly how you get that player on your team, that kind of player on your team. But that's where it starts. They need another ball handler. I think they have more than enough. And then you've got to look at the backup big position, a guy who can credibly play the 4 and the 5.
Okay, we got a question right here. Got a few minutes left, y'all. We're gonna get up out of here. Frank Hefner, my man, says, "Let me ask one question. Is Lawrence Frank the guy for the job? Because I'm going to be honest, after 5 years or 6, I don't think so."
teams don't really replace their front offices unless there's discord or unless there is such a massive level of failure that a team is like, yeah, let's just replace everybody in here. Let's clean house. And again, I feel like people are just looking at this entire series or the entire state of the franchise from how the series went. Like, if it's my opinion, like the front office has been not great, but it's been fine. It's probably been about a B level. And Steve Ballmer is just he has comfort with this front office. Like he's not going to change the front office. He's not going to change the head coach. Like he's not that kind of owner. When you look at some of these teams around the league, like that's just only dysfunctional teams, which ironically the Denver Nuggets were quite dysfunctional, are going to look and be like, yeah, we're gonna lose all these guys. They won a championship, and they still were like,
And
front
see,
office gone, head coach gone. You know,
it's and see that's where I wanted to also say, like, you had a team in Denver who won a championship, and the owner obviously knew something that everybody else didn't, and they made a move that actually, in my personal opinion, I think brought them together rather than made them go apart. And you said Steve Ballmer is the one who likes the front office. So all this keeping Ty Lue, keep Lawrence Frank here, this is all on Steve Ballmer's watch. Like he
that's
is
ownership, man.
okay. So it's okay. All right. So he's doing it.
Like
Gotcha.
that's how it always is. You know, like the if you have an organization where I mean, same thing in Denver. Like, and Denver never, you know, they never really replace head coaches and front office like that. You know, Denver's actually pretty stable. But why did things go south in Denver? Because of the relationships. Michael Malone hated Calvin Booth. Calvin Booth resented Michael Malone. Calvin Booth would draft young guys. Sound familiar? And Michael Malone hated those young guys, you know, vice versa. Like Michael Malone is the kind of personality head coach where he just doesn't, you know, he's going to be that voice just needs to get tuned out sometimes, you know, like the Nuggets players were just worn down from Michael Malone and David Adelman. The relationship that David Adelman had was different, but it was familiar but different. And that's important because it's like David Adelman had been an assistant under Michael Malone for what, like 8 years or something like that. So, you know, those guys, like David Adelman knew how to kind of complement, if you will, Michael Malone. If it's like if you're going to have someone lead the team for the last 3 games of the season, you get a guy who it's like, well, at the very least, you know what makes these guys tick more or less, you know. So, but that's a rare situation. You don't see teams going and saying, "Hey, we're going to fire our coach before the year." For everything
Yeah.
time it works, like for Denver, you can look at the Memphis Grizzlies who fired Taylor Jenkins with less than a month to go in the season, or yeah, like 3 weeks left or something like that. And clearly that didn't work in the short term. Now they're going to give Thomas Asalo a chance to, you know, actually have his own team and everything. But you can say Taylor Jenkins basically got fired before the season even started. Like they didn't let him pick his assistants. When you take that access away from a coach, and again, this is what differentiates Memphis' situation from LA's. Steve Ballmer was like, who can we get to re-energize this coaching staff? Tyron Lue has a great relationship with Jeff Van Gundy. Jeff Van Gundy's like, I'm not going to a team that is going to do something crazy like fire their coach. Again, sound familiar, right? So that's
Yeah.
why Jeff Van Gundy's here. Jeff Van Gundy got wind that the Clippers weren't committed to Tyron Lue, and the Clippers are so committed to Tyron Lue that they extended him last year. Jeff Van Gundy is like, hey, y'all are cool. I'm not leaving what I've got. Like Jeff Van Gundy won a ring in Boston in their front office. That's pretty stable situation right there. Like Jeff Van Gundy didn't have to leave Boston. He could have chilled there, you know, comfortably got paid Now I have to go to an organization that was in disarray. That's not the Clippers right now. You look at it from people who are disappointed. Everyone's disappointed, but if you keep making emotional, rash decisions, your disappointment is going to be expanded because you are all of a sudden not only a team that doesn't have your shit together on the floor, but you don't have the foundation to getting your shit together at some point. That's where the Phoenix Suns are at. The Phoenix Suns have literally had Kevin Durant on their team 3 years in a row and have fired the coach at the end of each one of those seasons. Do you think the Phoenix Suns are closer to where they need to be or farther away?
Definitely farther. And do you think the team, the Nuggets, the players tuned out Mike Malone? The owners seem to have, respect for Mike Malone and Calvin Booth, but he made a decision that he felt needed to be made. How do you feel like, not the ownership, not the front office, how do you feel the players are responding to Tyron Lue, and based off of their relationship as a whole, as far as the players from top to bottom, how do you think they respond to Brian Shaw in contrast? Because I would like to know your that.
I think you cut off at the end there.
No, I would like to just know what is your kind of feeling of how the players respond to Tyron Lue. He's been there for 5 seasons. Do you feel like his voice is still being heard? And based off of that, how do you feel like Brian Shaw, like, because he did a little bit of coaching as well? Do you feel like they have two different types of vibes as far as the players are concerned?
To be honest with you, not really. I mean, because Brian Shaw and Tyronn Lue go back all the way to the Lakers in the turn of the century, man. Like that's a long relationship. And the thing is, ironically, Brian Shaw's head coaching opportunity came in Denver. He was Michael Malone's predecessor in Denver, and the biggest knock on Brian Shaw when he was coaching the Nuggets was Brian Shaw trying to relate to the players somehow and how he really struggled with that. Like he was like, "Man, I tried to rap to the players in the locker room and it went over guys' heads." Like, that was Brian Shaw's head coaching experience. And Brian Shaw hasn't really been considered a head coaching candidate for anybody since outside of his time with G League Ignite. So the best thing about Brian is that he's a different voice, but he is more like a sounding board for Tyronn Lue, as much as he is a sounding board for the players. I think Brian Shaw, when he got to coach, Brian Shaw just tried to keep things simple, and I think that's what a lot of assistants will do when they're in that spot. Like it's still collaborative, even though Tyronn Lue was injured and unable to be with the team for a lot of March. There was still that sense of everyone's on the same page as a coaching staff. It was the same thing with Jeff Van Gundy. Jeff Van Gundy left the team for weeks at the end of the regular season. Someone was running that defense while the Clippers were taking off as part of that 18-3 run to start the season because Jeff Van Gundy didn't rejoin the team until the last week. Brendan O'Connor and Dante Jones did outstanding job of filling in for Jeff Van Gundy. And so that is a credit to those coaches, those assistant coaches. It's a credit to Tyronn Lue as well. And that's something that the players feel. You ask, how do the players receive those guys, especially Tyronn? And I've asked Tyronn multiple times. It's like, dude, why do you even want to do this? Like, you see coaches get let go left and right. Mike Brown takes the Sacramento Kings to the playoffs. He can't even keep his job 2 years later. Same thing with Michael Malone. Michael Malone wins a championship 2 years later. He's gone. Taylor Jenkins was the winningest coach ever. He's gone. Like, but when it comes down to it, is Tyronn Lue does a really good job of understanding what his players need in a particular moment, and he does a good job of maintaining the relationship. It's always about the relationship with these guys. If James Harden, Kawhi Leonard were saying that Tyronn Lue's, they're rolling his eyes at what Tyronn Lue is putting together over the course of a year, then Tyronn probably isn't here. If it's a Zubats, a guy who has been working with these guys, these coaches for now 7 seasons, but especially specifically with this coaching staff for 5, Like, if the feedback was negative coming from a Vitsa Zubats, then that would be a problem, but it's not. Tyron Lue gets through to these guys. Like, these guys, they do play hard for T. Lue. That's why the effort in Game 7 was as disappointing as it was, because it wasn't representative of what you saw for most of the season. That team needed to be good, establishing an identity in the offseason, especially in the preseason training camp, and to start this year, especially with Kawhi out. And they did that. And that's why you see Tyron Lue get the credit that he gets outside of the organization. But that's also why Ballmer loves T. Lue, why Lawrence Frank and T. Lue, they've had a long-standing relationship. There's so much there where you let T. Lue go, and it's like you're promoting a coach from the inside. It's like there's not the same person keeping that group together like T. Lue keeps together. And if you just clean the coaching staff out and bring someone else in, sure, you're going to get a new voice and a new way of doing things. Do you have the personnel to fit that? Does the front office have that chemistry and connection of that give and take? Maybe you develop that, but you can't take that for granted. They have a good thing going. It might not be satisfactory to a lot of fans, but I also think a lot of fans, they pick and choose what they want to see from other organizations, whether they're good or not. And the Clippers just aren't in the point where they have to make a move at those positions.
All right, let me get this last question in. So I have a question. What should the Clippers be doing with the young players going forward, especially after getting rid of young players throughout the years? And also, do you think the championship window has closed for the Clippers, Law?
I mean, I said the championship window closed last year. So, I mean, people weren't happy that I put it as bluntly as I did, but like, the window closed last year when Kawhi's knee gave out and they couldn't get through the Mavericks. And at that point, you're looking at, it's been 3 years since you won a playoff series. I said it was closed. There's a headline in it. There's a story from last year. Y'all can find it, I'm sure. I mean, if people thought that's saying, if you look at the Clippers as you need to be competing for a championship, well, you're kidding yourselves. Like, the players
Do the front office believe that, you think?
The front office's actions speak louder than their words. I'm just going to put it that way. So, I think the front office believes that they are going to be competitive while they get to a point where they can realistically contend. But I think you just got to look at the games, look at the teams that are contenders and how did you perform against those teams? I don't consider the Nuggets a contender right now, but if they beat the Thunder, guess what? They're contenders. You know what I'm saying? Like, if the Nuggets don't beat the Thunder, then the Thunder are looking at themselves like, wow, we won a championship. And then we couldn't get back to the conference finals back-to-back years. That's how that shit works. The Thunder, I look at as contenders right now. But if they can't beat the Nuggets, bro, I will sit there and tell you 2 weeks from now, they aren't contenders. You know what I'm saying? Flip it. The Pacers are a team no one talks about as contenders. But if they mess around and get back to the conference finals back-to-back years, that's a contender to me. You're right there. You're games away from an NBA Finals. You're a contender. The Clippers need to just do it. I don't care what the front office says at this point. Like, they can say whatever they want. It's about actions. And the actions to me speak of a team that is trying to get through these contracts. And by get through contracts, I can say Kawhi Leonard's contract and get to identifying who the next guy is that is closer to their prime and can lead the Clippers to a point where they can say, we are a legitimate threat in the West to do something. The time for that, as far as who's leading the team now from a player perspective, it's probably over. And
so you don't think Kawhi's that? You don't that guy anymore?
No.
Okay.
No. I mean, because when Kawhi's at his best, he reminds you of, a top 5 player. But over the course of a regular season, how often do you get that guy? And now in the playoffs, how often can that guy perform at that level? And also, can you keep that guy healthy? There's too much. Can he be healthy? Can he play enough games? Can he not get locked up by Aaron Gordon? There's too much of that going on. Now, Kawhi can change that if he's healthier, if he plays a lot more games next season, if they get into a first round, and I don't care who they play because Kawhi is playing that well. I mean, Kawhi played pretty well, but is Kawhi enough? No, not anymore. So um, and
I
that's
don't
the
think
thing.
he's I don't think he's good enough. I don't think he had another guy to come with him. I think if you look at I personally thought he was the best player in the series because Jokic struggled outside, I think, one game. Murray had one great game. Harden had one great game.
I
But
think
as far
Kawhi only had one great game. Game two, outside of game two, I don't think Kawhi got to 30. You know,
right, he scored every game over 20.
he
I
did,
think he
but
was
that's the thing. Did you need more from Kawhi to win this series? I think objectively, the answer is yes.
yeah, but that's the thing. I think if he had a real second star, like I think Jokic got more help from his supporting cast than what Kawhi did. And
Absolutely.
because of that,
I think Aaron Gordon was the best player in the series. Point blank. I
really.
think you look at Aaron Gordon. Aaron Gordon
Mhm.
was the biggest mismatch on both ends of the floor. Aaron Gordon could not be guarded. He clearly couldn't be boxed out. And Aaron Gordon made the biggest, the big plays, the big impact. You look at game one, you look at game four. The leading scorer for the Nuggets in game seven, who was it?
Aaron Gordon.
Aaron Gordon. Aaron Gordon scored as many points in game seven as Kawhi did. They were guarding each other. Look at Kawhi struggle to guard Aaron Gordon, and then vice versa. Look at Aaron Gordon comfortably get to his spots, whether he was picking and rolling, pulling up for a jump shot, running the floor, all that. And you don't look at a series with Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic, James Harden, Kawhi Leonard, and say that guy is going to be the best guy in the series. But they all them dudes canceled each other out, BJ. And so I love Kawhi, man. I think that he's had an incredible career, and it's a privilege to cover him. I'm sure you feel a similar way. And when I
Yeah.
look at who are top five, top 10 guys in the league, I think I'm very big on the regular season. I'm very big on, I'm not looking at who I need for one game. I'm looking at who I need to get to that one game, if that makes sense, whether it's the regular season or a playoff series. And I really look at it like that. And if you want a one game player, I think a lot of guys would take Kawhi. But if you're looking at can you build your team around this guy player? That's where it gets tricky with Kawhi. That's where his value decreases somewhat. And the kind of player Kawhi is at this stage of his career, is he the most athletic? Is he the biggest? Is he capable of, do you play through him? Kawhi's not that kind of player. He's a forward who is not someone. The only player who's ever asked Kawhi to be the guy that they played through. The only coach he's ever had that did that was Doc Rivers. When Kawhi first came to the Clippers, Doc Rivers was like, "We're playing through Kawhi Leonard." No other team has done that. And so we know what Kawhi needs as far as support around him, and we'll see if the Clippers address that. I don't think the issue is offensively as much. I think offensively the Clippers need to complement the roster a little bit more to protect guys who might not be there. James, top of the list. Like James is too old to be the only true point guard on a team. Period. But then when you get into a playoff series, you do not let this be the last playoff series where Kawhi Leonard has to wrestle with Aaron Gordon or James Harden has to wrestle with Aaron Gordon, because that was James Harden's assignment for the first 5 games or so of the series. Eventually, they switched James Harden on to Christian Brown, and next thing you know, Christian Brown is lighting up the Clippers
And
defense.
that's what I was saying with James. Like, as great as he is on offense, like I mean, and he even struggled efficiency wise this season. He's not what he was in Houston. Defensively, it's like who is he gonna guard? You can't guard Jokic because he's too big inside. He's gonna post you up. Aaron Gordon, same thing in the mid
Yeah.
post. Michael Porter Jr. maybe if he stays on the 3 point line, but he's 6'10". Christopher
Well,
Bron's on the glass, and then Jamal Murray. It's not even a matter of can you guard him. He's using Jokic with the pick and roll, probably the best in the league. So it's like, who are you gonna guard at this
yeah.
point?
Yeah, like and I will give credit, like I said, I'll give James credit for the defensive role because I think we missed that part too. Like when you're building a team, when you're figuring out lineups, when you have optionality with your roster, I think it's a matter of like where are guys going to be? Like your best offensive players got to guard somebody. And over the course of the year, one of the reasons why the Clippers didn't need that four as much is because if you look at how the Clippers played over the course of the regular season, they asked James to deal with the fours. And James, I think, did a really good job with that for most of the season. Again, this was a top 5 defense with Norman Powell and James Harden playing the majority of the games in the lineup. Like, and those guys, they weren't liabilities to the point where they broke the defense. Like Jeff Van Gundy built a defense where James was battling the bigger bodies. He was getting, strips and steals and stuff like that. And then you got an opportunity to have the best defensive rebounding percentage, and some of that too. But they gang rebound. But what you establish in the regular season, it doesn't always say what's going to happen in a playoff series, because in a playoff series, you're playing not just one team, but you're playing that same team over and over again, and that's a good team. Their personnel is good. They have things that you have to account for. And so going into next year, that's where it's like, if you're bringing James back, what does that mean for Norman Powell? Because to your point, like if James is the guy that you say, hey, you guard the power forwards, and a lot of these power forwards, they're not like Aaron Gordon. They're weak as hell. they're power forward in name only. They're fours, but they're not. They ain't real forward. Like you're not worried about them getting physical. You're not worried about them posting up. You're not worrying about them being offensive threats because they ain't got no bag. They don't really have that kind of attention. You can get away with putting James Harden on someone like PJ Washington, for instance, and I think PJ is one of the better power forwards in the league, certainly top 15. But it's just different, right? It's a different kind of consideration. Norm is your high guy, for the most part. You're asking Norm to take on the weakest offensive player on another team. And what was ironic is the Nuggets have such a great starting lineup that in this series, that was normal in Michael Porter Jr. And sometimes it worked out because Michael Porter Jr. had a very uneven series. He did not have an uneven Game 7 though, and those are the margins that go into a playoff series. You can get through a regular season. I thought the Clippers had a great regular season, BJ. Like point blank, full stop. And I think any of the criticisms that go into what the Clippers need to do to be better, to go further next year, all those things has to be within the context of how they even got to that point in the playoffs to begin with.
Do you think the Clippers have done a good job developing the young talent that they currently have? Because we've had a flummox of talent, and I mean, yeah, we did see the last few minutes of that game against Denver. Kobe Brown, 12 points, obviously.
Kobe Brown is the only reason the Clippers didn't lose that game by a record margin for the franchise in Game 7. So shout out to Kobe, I guess.
So at what point do you think the development of the talent has been also an issue from, Moussa Diabate, from Kai Jones to, of course, Brandon Boston, New Orleans, you got Jordan Miller. Like, why is it that the development doesn't seem like it's getting where it needs to be at? And because at some point it's going to have to come down to you're not ready, but the only way to get ready is what is your plan on developing them? Do you think the Clippers have done a good enough job? And if they haven't, why haven't they really focused on developing this talent?
Well, it's easy to say why they haven't focused on it. Like, you see the Clippers 9-man rotation. Who's supposed to be playing over those guys? That's the short answer. But also, I've talked to all those dudes. I talked to the guys still on the Clippers regularly, and all those dudes that you talked about between Kai, Moussa, Brandon. I saw all those guys. I actually got to see all those guys fairly late in the season. And for one, I think people have a really hard time comparing the Clippers and their draft assets with guys who are literally top 20 picks. Like, top 20 picks are both on teams that don't have as many rotation spots locked down by veterans, and they're not as good. They're probably bad teams that are like, well, it's not like we're doing anything as far as winning games, winning regular season games. Like, we're going to have spots for players. Brandon got to play this year because the New Orleans Pelicans had the most snake-bitten season ever, which is saying a lot because the Pelicans usually have snake-bitten seasons. But this year was on another level. Like, everybody that plays Brandon's position got hurt. You got to play Brandon. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh, look, Brandon's playing well while his team's getting crushed by, 10, 15 points a night. Like, Musa is the same thing. Like, if every damn center on your team is hurt and you got to be the one to play, you're going to play. And people don't give the Clippers credit for what those guys went through while Paul Hewitt was coaching them down there with the G League team. I think that those guys got a chance to be coached hard, to get experience playing at that level. And when their opportunity came, those guys made the most of it. Same with Kai Jones. Kai Jones went from not playing in the NBA to getting a chance to be in the system. And when he got an opportunity for Dallas, when Dallas was literally running out of players, he played well. And Kai was actually a first-round pick, so it's not like you're working with nothing there. But again, is it leading to winning? And I don't think anyone who's left the Clippers has contributed to winning somewhere else, as far as being a draft pick of the Clippers. The Clippers have a limited set of assets. This year, they're picking 30th and 51st. And everyone's going to be like, well, we're hoping a rookie gets a chance to play for the Clippers. And we all know that that's probably not the case. Like, Lawrence Frank pretty much said, when it comes to needs, that's what they're going to do free agency for. They're going to look at the free agents. They're going to have some assets free agency-wise. And it's like, if the Clippers want a better backup center or a real point guard, and I've seen Tyus Jones' name so much, like, maybe. The issue with Tyus Jones is that he's small and the Clippers value positional size. You want to hint at who the Clippers might draft or who the Clippers might acquire, go that route. Can they shoot? Do they have skill? Can they guard? And do they have positional size? So I don't look at anyone who they're drafting as someone who might contribute to the Clippers next year. I look at Kobe Bryant and Jordan Miller as, okay, you guys have been on the program for 2 years. Next year's year 3. The Clippers rarely sign these dudes to their second contract. If it's going to happen, Jordan technically is on a second contract now because he got promoted out of the two-way. We've seen Jordan Miller get a chance. And the thing is, it's like, that is development. Jordan Miller was not a scorer at the University of Miami. He goes and he plays with the G League team, and all of a sudden, he develops skills that we didn't see in college. You know what I mean? That's player development as well, BJ. It can't just be, oh, you didn't average a double figures for us. You're not developing. It's, what are you doing to get better behind the scenes, in practice, in the G League, over the summer, going from year 1 to year 2, going from year 2 to year 3. These guys did get better. Musa Diabate got better compared to the player that we saw when he was on the Clippers his first 2 NBA seasons. And that's a credit to him. But we also saw that even Charlotte was like, we're going to play bigger players because you're an energy big more than you are someone who can actually deal with the centers who are 250 pounds. We saw some of that with the Clippers. Why did they move on from Musa and pick Kai? Because they looked at Kai and was like, Kai's probably got more upside athletically. Well, now why did they move on from Kai and have Patrick Baldwin Jr. on the team? Because they looked at Kai. They were like, not skilled enough for the 4, not big and physical enough for the 5. And we got a guy in Patrick Baldwin Jr. who we're going to see what we got here. And Patrick Baldwin
but don't you think that's a little bit indecisive, though? Like, they can't seem to make up their mind on what they want?
I don't think it's indecisiveness. I think it's looking at, and I'm really just trying to be objective here. I think when you look at it, you're trying to understand and get these guys in the building. You're developing a relationship with them. You're trying to see if you can give them something from an opportunity standpoint, a developmental standpoint. How do they translate that to helping the team that is actively trying to win games during the regular season. And I look at all these guys, it's like if Kobe Brown's going to win a job and actually outplay veterans and get on the floor, then you have an opportunity to keep that spot. Jordan Miller, same thing. It's like Amir Coffey probably not going to be on the team next year.
That's crazy.
So you're going to have, I mean, because the alternative is re-signing Amir Coffey when you know all the ups and downs. You know Amir Coffey is as good as he's going to be. Amir's going to get a good deal somewhere else, and Jordan Miller is going to get an opportunity. And for Jordan Miller, it's like, hey, Jordan Miller might be a better scorer than Amir. He might be able to draw more fouls, get to the paint, penetrate, get downhill better than Amir does, have more length, significantly more length than Amir on the defensive end and be able to make more plays there. But you need Jordan Miller to get stronger. You need him to get more attentive to what he needs to be better at defensively. Lawrence Frank put a specific number on Jordan Miller's spot up 3-point percentage and where he needs to be. When Jordan Miller got an opportunity to play in November, everyone was happy because it was like, man, this dude put in the work, said he wanted a rotation spot, played great in summer league, played great in the preseason. Norman Powell tweaks a hamstring, and it's like, of course you're going to play Jordan Miller. Jordan Miller, you can run zoom action and get him downhill, and like we see where he could succeed at. But if Jordan Miller is going to get in there and he's not going to make open threes, or he can't guard his position, or he's going to try and take Russell Westbrook on one-on-one and find out that's not what you do, then it makes
Didn't they have that with KPJ though? Like, who's younger than Jordan Miller, like who can get transition, who can score, who's athletic. Like, didn't they have that with KPJ?
And have what?
Like, just basically the ability to, do everything that Jordan Miller they're hoping for him to do, because we ain't. Yeah. He was in college with all 4 seasons, so it's like you're not really coming out like a freshman player. You're 20. Was he 24, 25?
Yeah, what the thing with Kevin is he plays a different position, number one. Number two, when it came to Kevin Porter Jr., they moved off of him so that they could give another player a chance to contribute to a playoff setting roster. Now it's Bogey. And I just feel like when it came to Bogdanovic, you saw in the regular season what happened there. Like, he played really well for the Clippers in the regular season. Did he have a great postseason? No.
I don't think he's the answer, Law. I don't think he's the answer. I'm being honest. I don't think Bogey's the answer, man.
Well, Bogey's going to be the backup shooting guard or small forward next year. Hopefully, if the Clippers have it right, the backup shooting guard. But with Kevin Porter Jr., I think he did well for the Clippers in his time with the team. But you're not looking at Kevin Porter Jr. as a developmental prospect. That's a guy who got paid, a 4-year contract by the Houston Rockets. Like, Kevin Porter Jr. is an established NBA player. He's not a young developing player. Like, we all saw the ups and downs of Kevin Porter Jr. I think Kevin played better with Milwaukee, but I also think that when it came down to it, the Clippers wanted someone who would be better in a more reliable, quite frankly, in a playoff setting. And so that's what they went with. And to be honest with you, the Clippers could use a version of the player that Kevin Porter Jr. is. And that's not what Jordan Miller is. That's not what Bogey is either. But at least with Bogey is more of a complementary talent that has experience in playoff settings. I think, like I said, Bogey, had a very good regular season for the Clippers. He didn't have it wasn't a good playoff matchup. Ironically, for the same reasons it wasn't very good for Norm. Like, the physicality, I didn't think Bogey dealt with that very well to start. And the Nuggets, every time they saw Bogey, they were like, fade on sight. He was an attack guy. Even Peyton Watson was attacking Bogdanovic. But you see what the Clippers value. They value positional size, skill, and shooting. They didn't feel like Kevin Porter Jr. from a decision-making and skill perspective was going to be someone that they wanted in the playoffs. And also they wanted to upgrade Jordan Miller so that they had that part of roster flexibility. That's why Kevin Porter Jr. wasn't on the team. So we want to see what happens as far as, like I said, how the Clippers approach upgrading the backup guard position, the backup center position. But when it comes to development has a lot of different tenets to it. I think the Clippers have actually done a pretty good job with who they've had to work with. And it's up to guys when they get opportunities to play well enough to keep those opportunities.
One last message, Law. So if you had one more thing to say to the Clipper fan base who is frustrated, who is aggravated, that is a little bit on the edge, what would you tell them at this point of the part of the year? What would you tell them? I'm gonna put you on the big
Man,
screen.
man, I would say that it's going to require some patience, and that's obviously the worst thing you can kind of tell people when you see a team playing as well as they are, when they don't have a young team, when they aren't good enough to make it through the first round. To be patient is not something that people want to hear. And at the same time, the team, every time you lower expectations for them, I feel like they do a good job of saying, "Hey, like we're going to play hard, we're going to play well." So um, I don't want to be the one to encourage you because I'm a bit too blunt for that. I think people who read me, uh, read my stories, read my reporting, they know I'm pretty objective and also know that I'm pretty blunt when it comes to where the team is at. I'm not really one to spread false optimism, so I'm not going to really do that here. I think that the Clippers are in a spot where they had a good regular season and a bad playoffs. They, I think, have a pretty good future in the long term. I think they are on the right track and have a good plan, and they're going to be committed to that plan. That doesn't mean they're going to be contenders next season. So all I can say is, as this thing develops, I'm gonna be on top of it. So that's all I'm gonna say from there.
As my boy, Mr. Law Murray, great work with him this season. Definitely have more to come. You gonna be at Summer League, right?
That's the plan. I ain't thinking about it right now, but that's the plan.
All right. Where can they find you at, Law?
The Athletic, the Athletic. Subscribe to the Athletic.
Y'all heard the man. I'm BJ. That's Law Murray, LA Clipper beat writer, and we'll be seeing y'all again next time. Hopefully, at the beginning of the season. And we out.
All right.
Peace.
Thank you, man.